I check in with myself all the time. And every time I check in, I think about the last time I checked in. I'd be like, I fucking teleported. Like all that could have been kind of nonsense between.
Like in The Martian when it's not Matt Damon, is it? Matt Damon.
Yeah.
It's Matt Damon. It's like he'd come back to the camera, and like I feel like that's how we got it. The time frames is like, oh, he's like, yeah, my shit's growing into potatoes now, and that's pretty cool. Like last time I was here, like I was having a mental breakdown.
Yeah, that's kind of I do that.
Yeah.
Smooth brain, man.
I feel like the really important part about checking in is understanding that like there's and I was explaining this even to my mom, because she hasn't thought about this either, but there's like the two layers, and I don't know if we've talked about this, but there's the two layers of your consciousness, right? Where there's like, you know, the one up front that does all your regular day-to-day thinking.
Yeah.
And then there's the one behind that can do the check-in thing and take a step back and be like, this is what you've been doing. But you can do, I feel like as you do that more and more, you get really good at doing it without any judgment.
Yeah.
And that's the most valuable part, where it's like, now it's a real journal entry, because it's just like, that's just what's happening. Like there's no attachment to what's happening. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. And looking at that objectively is super valuable when you're able to love yourself, because you're not like, you're not being harsh on yourself, because you have a bit of security in yourself.
Yeah.
So then it's not just you being mad at yourself and angry and then like throwing all these insults at yourself. It's you just objectively looking and be like, I'm not doing this right in my life. Or like, perhaps I'm not being positive enough, or perhaps that I'm not being empathetic enough.
Yeah.
And it's not like a punch to the stomach.
Yeah. And it's like the Moore's Law thing, where it's like, oh wait, is it Moore's Law or is it something else? Murphy's Law. It's like the Murphy's Law thing, where part of that non-judgment, you know, self-reflection is knowing that you're gonna fuck up. And like, that's fine, because like that'll just happen. Like it's gonna be impossible to not fuck up sometimes. And it's probably gonna happen like fairly often. But being able to look back and be like, yeah, I fucked up, that's fine. Like I'll do this differently next time.
It's also like Moore's Law, though, that each time you check in with yourself and you're kind to yourself, you're better able to check in without judgment the next time. And it's like exponential until you're the best person ever.
It's all about feedback loops. I've been thinking a lot about feedback loops.
But positive feedback loops.
Positive feedback loops. But just like feedback loops in general are like extremely powerful.
Because it's habit. And habit is like the only way we can change over a long period of time.
And perspective.
Perspective allows you to reflect on your habits and make new habits that are beneficial.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. But like I have a ton of perspective that is of no use to myself, because I am incapable of creating new loops. That was dark. I can make loops. I'm working on it.
Dude, can I show you guys the clip that actually low-key pulled me out of depression and made me feel like enlightened?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, dude, I got you guys.
So Mateo, as you're pulling this up too, I found myself doing this, and it sounds like maybe you have the same thing that goes on. But have you had little moments, especially after like you got out of college and you were sort of figuring out your life, that you had like big epiphany moments where like not even drug related necessarily, just like you saw like a video one day or something, and you just all of a sudden made this huge realization, and you're like, whoa, like whole new level of understanding of like what I'm doing here.
In a way, yes. So this only slightly applies because the clip I'm about to show you guys, it was something that I thought was interesting. I'm like, oh, this is insightful. I'm going to give this a try. And I found that putting the effort into that perspective and into this like, this path of thought was enlightening, and it did turn around my life, but it wasn't quite like the light bulb, like, oh, I figured it out now. It was like a labor of love, and it's taken like a lot of effort to it. But, looking back, I can see that as the moment. I was like, oh, when I saw this video and took this advice, this like was a huge turning point in my life. So yeah, in a way.
And what's interesting too, for me also, they usually do revolve around actually putting the work in and then starting the feedback loop.
Yeah.
Where it's like the start of the feedback loop is the epiphany, going like, whoa, that made me feel really good. Like, I wonder if I do it one more time, it makes me feel good again. And then it does. And you're like, holy shit, I figured something out.
Yeah. You just let it run.
Make sure that you are talking to yourself in a way that is loving and supportive. It became clear to me at a certain point in my life, I've had I've had friendships. I've been a good friend to people. And when a friend is in crisis, I know how to be there for them. I know how to hold a space that looks like listening. It looks like support. It looks like a back and forth. Maybe it just looks like a hug. Maybe it looks like being silent and just holding their hand. I know how to do that for a friend. I realize that when I am in crisis, when I have quote unquote fucked up, my response is, you fucking idiot. You know, how could you? Of course, what did you expect? If I spoke to my friends like I used to speak to myself, I would have no friends. So what I started to pay attention to was how I spoke to myself out loud and in my head. And in your head is a much more difficult conversation, but you can, I think, I judge, control the words that come out of your mouth. So if you do talk to yourself out loud, and I do, make sure that the words are loving and supportive and nourishing. Start the work of being your own best friend.
I remember you saying that. Like,
Yeah.
you were like, I started saying out loud, I love you to myself, and it like changed my life. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
There was like a marked change in your behavior, I feel like, after that. I feel like it was pretty clear from an outside perspective too. I'm like, whoa, Mateo's like acting different.
Because
Yeah.
Dylan, you also kind of put me onto that, where you're like, yeah, you kind of have to say it out loud, and it's kind of really hard at 1st.
Mhm.
And I felt weirdly stubborn about looking in the mirror and saying I love you. And like realistically, even if you don't mean it, you could probably say it. But I always felt this weird, odd, like stubbornness of looking in the mirror and just spitting out the words, I love myself, I love you. And that was always super weird for me. But I watched that video and I'm like, maybe you don't even need to mean it first, but just the words itself have meaning.
No.
So I said it at first without meaning it. And then I slowly like really try to look myself in the eyes. I'm like, I'm not speaking to the mirror. Like I'm speaking to you, motherfucker.
Exactly. Because when you're looking at yourself in a mirror too and really going like, I'm talking to you, all of a sudden the words coming out of your mouth is that step back layer of your consciousness, where it's like you're looking at the front layer and telling the front layer something, which is like a very different experience. And it does it's easier to get there when you're looking in the mirror. And then it goes back to the feedback loop again, where just telling yourself that you love yourself is naturally going to get you into the mode of being like, well, yeah, I mean, I do this really good. And then I also am really proud of myself for doing this and this. And like, you start to just think about the positive side of the stuff and go like, oh, like maybe I'm not such a shit person. Like maybe actually there are a lot of redeeming qualities about me that like make me worth it.
Yeah. And then that allows for your mistakes not to tear you down. And that allows for you to be honest and maybe even judgmental with your mistakes, but not just absolutely savage. It allows you to build that positive criticism.
Yeah.
And then I told Greg about it. I'm like, hey man, do this.
And I did.
Damn it.
It's hard. It's a weird thing to do. It's not an easy place to get to.
I actually do the opposite. And I don't think I'd ever acknowledge that I do, which is kind of interesting.
You just look in the mirror and you let your stepped back version of your
look in the
consciousness
mirror. That's
go
like
like,
far.
I
That's
fucking hate you.
not.
The mirror talks to you, dude.
No, but like I'll fuck up like just in my life and I'll be like, you're fucking awful, dude. Like, of course you would fuck up. All right, good talk. And I just go about the rest of my day. And I'm like, that's definitely bringing me away from like where I need to be.
Yeah. And because I feel like also when you do something good, you're like, you become God in a way.
As like I hit the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's so extreme and like the extremes aren't healthy. Like you got to love yourself, but like there's realism to it as well.
Do you have an example?
Well, if we're going to use the talking to your friends as an example, like if Greg does something cool and I over congratulate him for something, it's like, oh, Mateo's kind of being sarcastic right now and an asshole. Like Greg's done a really good job posting. I'm like, wow, Greg, you really done a good job, huh? Yeah. And it's clear that's not like that's not real input, real criticism.
That's kind of the story of your life in a way, right? Where it's just, no, not the real criticism. No. Back up one more thought there. I feel like it's just the highs and the lows with you.
Right.
I feel like you just, and we've talked about it before in early episodes where you're just transitioning between like really low lows and then your highs are really high highs.
Just like a drug addict, dude.
Just like a drug addict, man.
Or someone who's bipolar.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it still creates a lot of value in your life. I do feel like the high highs are the moments where, and I mean, you said this before the podcast. I know you probably meant it like not, fully. I don't think you really meant it. But you're like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm smarter than most people at a lot of stuff. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you definitely are. Then it's those super high highs that are like, that does make you way smarter than a lot of people because you just have this crazy perspective on stuff that is actually like something most people just will never think about.
You got emotional width.
Mm-hmm.
Width.
You got major emotional girth.
Got some girthy boys over here, dude.
This low-key transitions really well into what I was doing. I had to take a pause because I was like, I don't know. Anyways, I've been watching a lot of Charles Manson clips, right? And
Classic.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about how that dude's not crazy, but also was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And most people see him and they're like, everything he says is nonsense. The dude just throwing up words. But I can tell in like the late clips when he's like 60 that he'll be on the right track of a very meaningful insight and then lose it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's because he's blown out. He's like too fried.
Yeah.
Is there value in those peaks because you're seeing things most people don't see? Maybe, but I feel like only if you can bring it back. Like Kanye out here bringing great art. Everyone loves his art, but everyone's like, he's whack. And it's like, well, he is able to make great art because he's making it at those peaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But if he didn't make art and he was just peaking, people would go, well, that's a crazy fucking dude. And then when he was depressed, people would go put him in jail,
Yeah, that's an interesting one for you because I would argue you do bring it back with your friends. Like you have a vibe about you where I think we all get that the stuff that you are thinking about at those high highs, even though maybe there's not art coming out of it yet. I'm like, I believe you. I'm like, maybe that's just because I'm your like best friend and known you forever. So I'm like, I know when you're being truthful.
Yeah.
So I can see the truth in you. But yeah, for other people, it's probably hard to get across without making some sort of art form that makes them go like, whoa, like, yeah, this person's brain's working really well. Like, check out this thing they made.
Mm.
But then getting back to the height versus width, I think that's really crucial because the high highs come with low lows, and that sucks for everyone around you. Like no one wants to be around someone who's bouncing between the two spectrums, but someone who's able to walk really far in either direction, horizontally, those people rip because you're like, whoa, what rabbit hole did you get down? You get to show people, and that's like a really nice place to.
But in terms of width, do you mean like growth all the time, or is it more of like
I think it's good that we define width because obviously high and low is happy, sad, high, depressed. Like those are that everyone understands that.
Yeah.
I don't think, at least personally, I'm incapable of even understanding width when I'm depressed. Like when I'm depressed, I think where I am is where I'm always going to be time-wise and the only place you can be. But when I'm not depressed, which is like 95% of the time these days, I'm very aware of like, we have side to side. Like since I've been really far from center, I've been like, oh, I know you can get really far, but then I do feel like my body restricts me to certain horizontal walls.
Yeah, and that makes it less of like a right to left, like classic graph scenario when like it's like going this way. And it's like it's still like high highs and low lows, but there's still progression in the fact that you're getting further down that x-axis. It's the x-axis, right? When you're stuck in negative feedback loops and you have bad habits in your life, there is no progression.
Yeah.
It's just like a cycle of high highs and low lows, and it's just kind of that circle going back and forth. And I guess it's lacking that third dimension. That third dimension is the movement through time. It's just kind of all that same shit.
See, and that's where I was kind of getting into off air for a second about like, let's say being high just with weed versus sobriety is I feel like weed almost takes the time element out of it where you can get, at least for me, it's like you get on one side of it and then, you lose that other side, and it can be good or bad. So it's like sometimes it'd be like, oh, like I feel great and I have this great perspective and I'm like, I'm actually really motivated and like I want to like go do this thing that's like this, but that it's with a complete lack of understanding of the other side of that width spectrum. And same thing on the negative side where it's like you don't end up seeing the other side of it. Where I feel like when you're sober, there's I'd almost want to describe it as like 2 points on the graph where they're both moving through. and I'm going to take it back to the 2 steps of consciousness thing.
Yeah.
Where your forward brain is going like way far off, but that second step back consciousness is running along the same path, but closer to the center line. And it's giving you a perspective of like, whoa, I'm way out over there. But like, there is still this other thing that I know it exists.
Just kind of like in like a grounding term, I guess. Like,
yeah, it's grounding, where I feel like it's, I mean, you know, fucking literally lifted if you're like, you know, like smoking weed. But it really that's what I realized. I was like, whoa, I'm like really taken out of the dual perspective, which is fun, can be really fun. But it can also be like, ooh, I don't like not being able to think about the other perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so does it make you more is or more ego, or does it align them more?
I think it aligns them more.
Gotcha.
It just makes everything go down one track. And I tunnel vision into that one thing and I lose the perspective of the other thing. So it's like, if I'm feeling bad and I have like a negative thought train, I'm like, wow, this is like really real. It's like when you say you're depressed and you're like, I don't understand the other side. Like it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. That's what I feel like. I'm like, the other side doesn't exist. I'm like, this is my true feeling. It's like, no, that's not your true feeling. Like your true feeling is when you're sober and you clearly see both sides.
Can I draw for a sec? Because I feel like I need to get like,
yeah,
this is pretty. When you're down here in depression,
mm-hmm.
you're like stuck in this box.
Yeah.
And you are unaware you can move up and you're having trouble moving side to side.
It's a little room.
It's a little room. When you're high, you're up here and you're like, this rips. I can't even imagine being sad. But you're still having trouble moving side to side. And I would even argue that being high is not as good as being yourself when you're going down like a tunnel somewhere off into the distance.
What do you mean by moving side to side, though? I guess that's where I'm getting lost here.
And that's what I wanted to define, because like up and down is happy, sad.
And side to side is the emotional width.
Mm-hmm.
Is the emotional width.
Just using the word emotion is a great way to describe it. Because there's a lack of emotional perspective, I feel like, when you're high. You get locked into one.
I think food might be a good way to describe it where people could understand, is that this is like eating a mouthful of caramel.
Yeah.
This is like eating literal dirt. And then in here is like a sandwich where you're taking all sorts of shit and mixing it together.
Yeah.
And to think that a mouthful of caramel is better than a sandwich
it's pretty wild.
It's pretty fucked.
Well, and at some point it gets gross. Like that's where I got to it. I'm like, I just like kind of feel icky. Like if I'm just by myself eating a mouthful of caramel, I'm like, I don't like this. I'm like, I like it, but I really don't at the same time. Like it's just not worth it.
It's like taking a premise way too far. Like
caramel, yummy.
Yeah.
More caramel.
Yeah.
And that's the problem I have with like positive manifestation. Yes, positive manifestation's good, but it's not like positive manifestation good. No bad thought now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're limiting your spectrum.
Yeah, you're limiting your width, dude. Get wide with us.
Get wide
with
us.
us. Get the delts. I do feel like people who are really mechanically inclined or like engineer math kind of people understand the whole idea of like you can have a number between 1 or 0 and 1. Like that immediately gives good, because that is the way audio works, the way video works, it's the way math, engineering, like all that shit. It's like there can't be things outside of these two. We fucking made barriers, and like this is a ton of meth, and this is like you're about to die from being too still. Like those are your two options, and like both of them are nowhere near as good as like having a full dynamic range.
Yeah, or it can be both at the same time. And it's like both those emotions can exist at once, and it's like okay, like that's real too. Yeah,
like having a child born the same week that your parents die. It's like you're getting almost meth vibes with like extreme depression. Well, I guess that's just normal.
Or if you're even like not financially ready for it or something, where it's like your child's born and you're like, oh my gosh, massive burden. What is my life about to be? But then on the other side of it, at the same time, you're like, but this is also the best day of my life. I couldn't be happier and more filled with love that this little thing is now in my life.
Yeah. And it's like confusing, but like your brain's capable of like computing all those emotions.
Yeah. And being able to compute them all and being okay with all of them at once is, I feel like, how you figure it out. You're like, cool. Like I have these two perspectives and I got to figure it out.
You could take the blinders off for like half a second, you know, because we get so far down like our train of thought. Our emotions take a hold of what we're saying. Yeah, exactly.
A little width going, dude.
You got to get a little width going because you get so far down your rabbit hole, down almost, there's a lot of self-righteousness involved in it sometimes where you're so far into thinking that you're right that it's never once occurred to you to stop and like look around and be like, wait, is this why other people are like acting this way around me? Is this why I'm not getting my way? And it's kind of that like alternate perspective, which isn't fun when you're going down your tunnel and when you're speeding down with your blinders on like a racehorse.
Yeah.
But like you shouldn't be a racehorse going circles around a track.
That's the thing is you think like, I'm going to just get to the end of this tunnel.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, sometimes you're firing down this tunnel and you're only going to hit slate at the end.
Yeah. Or you're just going to do another lap. It's like you're letting your emotions drive you so hard to the point where you crash.
Mm-hmm.
That shit makes me so sad when I see, you made a great point that the track is like, even if they win this battle, they're going to find a new battle and run in circles again. And you're like, get out of the cycle, dude.
And it's the people that are always fighting. It's like they're not on the same frequency as the universe. They're always fighting battles in life. And if you're always fighting, like you might become a really strong and really good racehorse or a really good warrior. But like life isn't a track, or it shouldn't be a track. And you shouldn't put yourself in those cycles. You should build those happy, positive, good, yummy candy feedback loops.
Yeah, get yourself into the good cycles.
Yeah, that good. That yummy, yummy, sweet.
Because realistically, though, you're just going to blow out your knees.
Yeah, definitely.
You're going to be like a McDonald's manager who's fucking angry and goes home and is angry and then dies angry with a heart attack. And it's like,
yeah. Or you're going to be a really successful business person that kind of has like a slightly toxic life and can't quite build good relationships. But you win every lawsuit, but it's just like, at what cost? Like what you sacrificed. You sacrificed a lot of pleasantness in your life.
Yeah.
that's an interesting lane to be in. It's like the successful person who makes a horrible life for themselves.
Well, it's almost like, well, then are they really a successful person? Like, I feel like the reason they're so good is they're like, this is my version of success. And they've got that pillar built up. And then, yeah, they speed down that tunnel towards that version of success and completely neglect everything else that's going on around them.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, I'm like changing direction too often. Like,
yeah, that's another.
You need to make good strides and then look around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
I should stop using myself as examples. This dude I know, yeah, he does that shit.
Smooth brain, man.